Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the 5 greatest Tam-Tam crashes we almost never hear. I haven't done a percussion rant in a long time, and every so often the frustration builds that something has to just come out. It amazes me that composers write forte, triple forte, crashes on the tam-tam, or even just forte, and you never hear them. Usually at the single biggest climax of the entire work or movement. It's beyond bizarre. And having played in orchestras for decades, I have a sense of why, because most conductors just hate noise. They don't like loud things. And they don't like loud things that drown out other loud things. But the tam-tam is technically the loudest thing in the orchestra, if you do it right. And when a composer writes a fortissimo for the tam-tam, it should be overwhelming. It's that simple. Not for very long. Most of these things last a beat or two and then die away. But you got to be able to hear it. And there is nothing that is more viscerally thrilling than a big, loud crash, and emotionally devastating, too. I mean, it really tells you what the music is about. It's about some sort of catastrophe or something, usually. Sometimes it can be triumphant, as at the end of Mahler 2 or Respighi's The Pines of Rome. But quite often, it's some sort of emotional nexus where the music is everything's going to hell, and you want that extra bit of oomph to signify that. And that's how composers use the instrument. So it's absolutely ridiculous that conductors don't let us hear it. Now, one of the problems, I will say this, one of the problems in making records is that big, loud tam-tams tend to blow up microphones. I know this for a fact. And Michael Fine, who occasionally comments here, can attest to it because he produced the recording I played in of Hovhannes' Symphony for Metal Orchestra. And I was the giant tam-tamist, and Hovhannes liberally sprinkles the score with fortes. And I had my big, huge 40-inch tam-tam, 38, whatever it was, and was just swinging away. And at one point he said, listen, you just got to tone it down because it's overloading, it's overwhelming everybody else in a recorded situation. So I get that. But then again, there are so many recordings where you can hear it perfectly well and it doesn't blow everything up. So, it all has to do with, I guess, the equipment, the engineering, the acoustics, and things like that. So I get that there are certain issues, but it should always be audible and distinctly audible and clearly audible and loud when it's marked loud. We have one case here in this list where it's not just marked loud, but that's a very, very interesting case because there's a lot of quiet percussion that you never hear either, which is a whole other topic. I mean, that's just a question of the conductor's sensitivity to texture, and most of them don't care at all. But the fact of the matter is that loud ones ought to be loud. And 3 of these loud tam-tam crashes occur in Mahler symphonies, which makes it all the more annoying, given how carefully Mahler orchestrated and how clear and inarguably superb his sense of theatrical timing and his sense of timbre and what an orchestra could and couldn't do is evident in each of these passages. Another problem, before we get to the actual examples, is just what equipment the orchestra has. Tam-tams have not been a major subject of instrumental improvement over the past few hundred years. I mean, most orchestras now have decent ones. They get them from China, or they get Paista, or sometimes UFIP from Italy. There's only a few manufacturers in the world to make these things. And they sound different. They have their own distinctive character and qualities. And most tam-tams back in the day, in the 19th century, were rather smaller than the ones that we use now, and somewhat higher pitched. Some of them had virtually no tone whatsoever. It was like hitting a pot with a wooden spoon. It just went clonk, and that was the end of it. Most orchestras had miserable percussion sections. Grieg complained bitterly about the inability of theater orchestras to come up with a decent tam-tam for his Peer Gynt incidental music. He said, why don't they have decent instruments? And why there's evidence of that, of composers complaining about horrible quality cymbals and lousy tam-tams. And most orchestras had that, and they had that really until the Second World War. German orchestras in particular were woefully inadequate when it came to percussion because they had a tradition of orchestral music in which composers didn't use very much. I mean, Haydn, Mozart, and Beethoven, the most percussion you'll get is the janissary instruments, that is cymbal, triangle, bass drum, and nothing else. But in France, for example, where symphony orchestras were much more closely allied to theater orchestras, opera orchestras, where all kinds of special effects obtained, you usually had percussion instruments. And that was true in England. It's true in the U.S. as well, to a certain extent. Those countries tended to have better traditions of percussion playing than Germany, except for timpani, where, of course, Germany had very fine timpanists and timpani parts written by German composers. So it was really a question also of locality and where you were. And now that orchestral sonority has homogenized in the Western world, that is, we've lost something very, very valuable. That is, these local sounds of various orchestras in different places. But on the other hand, we've gained tremendously in the quality of percussion playing and percussion instruments, largely because contemporary music requires, bags of percussion that sound decent. And conservatories train percussion players as specialists who know what they're doing and know what quality instruments are. And orchestras know that they have to get them. But even in 19th century music, there is a tendency not to use the best contemporary or modern instruments. It's to use the gong that we had back in 1820. That's, it's sort of a historical relic, and it sounds like crap. And certain orchestras and instrumental traditions prefer very dark sounding percussion, German orchestras particularly. They have these large tam-tams that are very, very dark sounding. They don't have a lot of overtones, a lot of brilliance when you hit them. And you want that. You want to hear a real crash, even if they're using the really good Chinese instruments from Wuhan, which come in all kinds of shapes and sizes and colors and varieties. I have a couple dozen of them. And, I'm very careful when I'm playing music to try and select, or I was careful back in the day when I played in the orchestras, to select a tam-tam that was appropriate for the music. And if it's set to hit it loud, then I hit the damn thing with all the force that I could muster. And it works. I mean, it sounds fabulous if you do it that way. Whether you want a big crash or a swoosh, you want to have a variety of instruments at your disposal, and you want to play them appropriately. And some works positively demand it. Mahler Sixth, for example, is one of those pieces where you have a tam-tam part, but then all of a sudden in the scherzo, he says he wants a deep tam-tam. Well, that tells us something. You really need to use two instruments. I always played Mahler Sixth with two tam-tams, one darker sounding than the other, because in the finale, the forte tam-tam crashes at the end of various sections are usually tied over many, many bars. So whereas for that scherzo passage and maybe a couple other places, you want something that just goes bong, with a dark shaded tone. In the finale, you want something with a lot of swoosh that's going to carry over for all of those measures that Mahler asks it to. And that really requires different instruments, but percussionists usually pay no attention, and conductors always pay no attention. It's horrible. It's just horrible. So here are the 5 greatest tam-tam crashes we almost never hear. First, the first movement of Mahler's Fourth, the climax of the movement. It's actually led up to by a whole sequence of mezzo forte tam-tam strokes. Dum pa da 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 dum pa da 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 dum. Underneath that, you're hearing psh, 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 psh. And then as the climax comes, ba-ba-dum, ba-ba-dum, there's a big bass drum roll. The tam-tam is more crescendo. And then fortissimo, crash. Most of the time, you don't hear any of that. Almost none of it. You hear it somewhat in Bernstein's recording. You hear it in Fritz Reiner's recording. There are a few where you do. And then that big climax, it goes for nothing without a big tam-tam crash underneath it. Now, there are many performances where you hear it somewhat, but it's supposed to be overwhelming. I mean, this is Mahler, for God's sake. This is not something where you need to be nice. It's something where you need to be scared witless. That's the point. So that's one of the big moments that's almost always disappointing on recordings. Listen to Zell's Mahler 4. You wouldn't know there's a tam-tam there at all. You hear nothing. It's awful. Okay, next, Mahler Symphony No. 5, the second movement, the big climax. Dum bum 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 ba da dum ba dum ba dum ba da chun 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 wham da 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 dum da 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 da. Big diminuendo. Yes, big triple forte or so tam-tam crash. It's the only one in the symphony, as with the Mahler 4, the only fortissimo tam-tam crash in the whole symphony. So you think you'd make an event out of it, wouldn't you? Listen to Karajan's otherwise fabulous recording of Mahler 5. You hear the tam-tam in all the strange places where you know in other performances, but at the climax, it's missing. It's just not there. Really not there at all. Most performances of Mahler's Fifth have nothing at that moment, and it is absolutely terrible. Barbaroli does. Barshai does. Levine does with Philadelphia. There are a few that do, but most of the time, it's just a disaster. It absolutely undermines the impact of that climax if you don't hear the tam-tam. It's a solo. All percussion parts are solo. Basically, they're meant to be heard, and dynamics have to be adjusted so that they can be heard. And gosh, it just drives me crazy when I get to that moment and it's not there. Even more frustrating is the climax of Mahler's Ninth, the first movement, because that's a crack. I mean, it's so literal. What's happening? It's ya da 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 with the cymbals and the bass drum, and the trumpet goes da da dum pa 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 da, and the strings are going. I mean, it's going off a cliff. It's the musical equivalent of some large object going off a cliff, and it's going to go splat when it gets to the bottom and hits the ground. It's like the Roadrunner and the Coyote. The rock falls. He's going, pow. Well, most of the time that's completely missing too, and that is so frustrating. Again, it's the only fortissimo tam-tam crash in the entire symphony, and it's the biggest climax in the movement. And you would think the conductors would take the care, the time to let the damn thing crash. And most of the time they don't. It's just endlessly frustrating. It really is. I can't remember the last time I heard a really satisfying rendering of that passage. And, it gets out of the way rather quickly. It's not like it blows everything away and overwhelms everything else. Of course not. The trombones are going, blah, bum, blah, blah, the timpani, pa, pum. But you're supposed to hear this dying sound underneath it all. It could be thrilling if it's done properly. So why isn't it? Almost ever. It's horrible. I mean, Bernstein makes sure you hear it. Credit to him. Schulte and his LSO recording makes sure you hear it. Credit to him. Most others, they're just hopeless. Levine makes sure you hear it. That's a good one. There are a few others like that, but it's dire. It's really dire. Until very recently, the Concertgebouw had a loud tam-tam where the louder you hit it, the less you heard. It was like a large tam-tam. It was like a black hole. And in those first Haitink recordings, you almost never hear what you're supposed to. You hear it quietly, fabulously. They had some wonderful instrument that did amazing piano tam-tam strokes. Listen to Haitink's recording of Mahler 2. But when the loud stuff came out, piff, it just disappeared. They used UFIP instruments, I think, for a while. But in any case, it really is just a scandal. Another absolutely obnoxious missing tam-tam stroke is the one at the climax of the finale of Sheherazade. I mean, it's a shipwreck, for God's sake. A shipwreck. What do you think that would sound like? Okay, it's a stylized shipwreck, but still, Rimsky-Korsakov only marks it forte, which indicates two things. Number one, he expected forte to be pretty loud. And number two, with most tam-tams, if you hit them very, very loud, hard, they will pop. You'll hear like this. Whereas he wants something that's going to sustain. If you look at the score, you see that's what he wants. He wants when it hits the rock. The ship hits the rock and disintegrates. I did a very good disintegrating rock shipwreck at Carnegie Hall when I played Sheherazade there. I had the tam-tam right on the proscenium edge of the stage at Carnegie Hall, and it was a paista, sound creation gong. It wasn't the normal one, because the normal one, actually, the symphonic gong, is really fairly unresponsive, especially if you want things in rhythm. And so you have to use some of the other ones they make, which are beautiful for symphonic purposes. They don't get used. So I had my sound creation gong set up, which had a wonderful long decay and a really bright metallic tone. It was fabulous. And I hit it from the back. You know, you don't always have to hit these things in the front, because it was right on the edge of the stage. I didn't want to fall off. The orchestra was sort of forward. So I hit it from the back, which was a surprise to the audience, because I went in the back and it went like this. And it was fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. And the conductor was kind enough to let me do it. You know, there's some conductors who, always say, tone it down. And I always say, okay, fine. And then I wait till the concert. Then I knock the crap out of it, because I really don't give a damn what they think. Then, last but not least, this is very, very interesting. This is a mezzo forte tam-tam stroke with a diminuendo and half-note tam-tam strokes going for the next 2 minutes, which you never hear. Richard Strauss, Death and Transfiguration. It's the moment at which the soul ascends. Death occurs. It's like a soap bubble popping. Mezzo forte. Mezzo forte does not mean piano. It has to be a healthy, audible sound. Now, in that historical Mengelberg recording with the New York Philharmonic, you hear, it goes crash like crazy. It's like fortissimo. Well, that's wrong. The best version of it is the last Carillon recording. Believe it or not, because there are earlier Carillon recordings of Death and Transfiguration where you hear nothing at all, or virtually nothing at all. But in his last one, he gives it a decent mezzo shot and then does the diminuendo. And it's marvelous. It's the best one there. Nobody else compares to it. Nothing else. I mean, Haitink's recording, you hear nothing. Sell's recording, you hear nothing. It's just so aggravating. And then after that, you've got piano, while that slow climax is slowly regrouping. It's very, very soft. And the tam-tam is hitting steady eighth notes. There's a rhythm there, a beat there that you're supposed to hear. And you virtually never do. Almost never. It's just terrible. So those are the 5. I've had a chance to vent and fetch. And every few years we have to do this, because it never gets any better. And nobody seems to care. And if you look at scores, you see what the composer wrote, then you listen to what the players do, and it makes you crazy, because you're like, what's going on here? It's obvious what he wants. It's obvious how much better it sounds if you do what he wants. And they just don't. So, oh dear. Keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.